Hi, this is Kiyoshi Taylor here at LightGrid Studios, and this is episode 3 of the Kiyoshi Taylor Global Forum. Today I have Mr. Freedom, who is. I'm just going to let you introduce yourself. I do not know where to begin with you. like,
Well, that's funny because I always get this question like, what do you actually do?
I still don't know, so
Wow, thank you. Well, thank you for having me, Kiyoshi. Um, well,
wouldn't be here without you. But
really, well, thank you. Well, for me, I think that question is always interesting in that I always look at that from the perspective of my existence. So, my grandmother gave me the name Freedom um, because I was born in the middle of a tribal genocide. It was pretty much like my dad's side of the tribe massacring my mom's side of the tribe when she was 6 months pregnant with me. And so she was running away from these guerrilla war soldiers um, in South Africa. And, and so she actually got into someone's house and she got into early labor. So I wasn't supposed to make it. So apparently, um, these wonderful people sent her to the hospital, and I was, I think I was born. I think that happened.
yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think that happened. We can check some documents.
Yeah, and so when my grandmother came to see me the following morning, um, she held me and looked at me in the eyes and said, "His name is Freedom," in that she had experienced nothing but a war and turmoil within the continent, the motherland in Africa. Uh, and so, I mean, as you know, we've had, slavery. Our people, they were moved different places in the world, and also uh, all these things that are happening with health, with education, and you name it. And so Africa being the motherland of humanity, that's where we all came from. Um, there is a need, rather a deeper rooted need, to create a free Africa. It is the foundation of our humanity. And so she named me that. Um, and so I did have the privilege, rather, uh, to work and learn from the elders, from like Nelson Mandela, for example, was very and continues to be very influential in my life. And there was a conversation that I had with him where he talked about education being the key to a world that works. So, in order for for the world to be peaceful, to be free, we ought to invest in education, and that's what Nelson Mandela uh, always believed and continues to. And so, part of what I do is moving that message forward and doing whatever has to be done for the world to work.
Now, when you wake up every morning, for those of you who don't know, he never sleeps. But when you wake up in the morning, you told me how you wake up, and I feel like everyone should try this. Maybe not every day, but like at least once. You name yourself hope or joy or education, for example.
Yes.
So tell me about that. You wake up every morning, and how are you education or joy in the morning?
Oh, well, that's interesting. You remember that. So when I wake up every morning, I actually reflect on the gift of life. That really I did actually get up this morning, and that there are thousands, if not tens of thousands or more, of other human beings that did not have that privilege every morning. And so I ought to do something with that gift. and I look at my space and see what's missing in the world that I can create. There is power in naming something. Like when you name something, you create something out there in the world. If I'm going to class and I notice that maybe I did have a student who was stressed about something, it could be about a college application, it could be about something that happened at school or something that happened in their relationship or with their family. And so I choose to create comfort for that day. And so I actually look at the mirror and say, who I am today is comfort. And everything that I do and wherever I show up today, comfort has to be present. I could name myself joy, that who I am is joy. Or who I am is inspiration. That human beings today will discover something miraculous about themselves, or perhaps do something audacious. Maybe realize things unimaginable, things they never knew were possible. And perhaps discover the inexplicable, like, wow, I cannot even explain it, and it's so awesome. So when I wake up, I am intentional. That gives me a grounding in how I function in the world that day.
See, that is, to me at least, that's truly inspiring. But that's also what inspires me is the fact that you're a teacher, and that's how you wake up in the morning. I'm gonna be real with you. Not many teachers wake up the way you do. You know, education right now is it's kind of like at a weird point because the new administration we have
Yes.
in control wants to basically privatize it.
Right.
And then we have the incoming problems and gifts of technology mixed in with the everyday issues of, poverty versus wealth.
Wow.
So we have all this going on, but you are here to help, in a way, consolidate it all.
Yeah, I mean, I'm teaching right now at Stanford, right? I'm teaching a course. In fact, two courses that I'm teaching. One of them is normativity and the architecture of human being, and that one was inspired by Professor Kenneth Taylor, who is your dad. Love him so much. He is my inspiration, and that he actually causes human beings to think beyond what's possible and challenge what's normal, and that you can change the rules of the game. There are norms, what things ought to be. We might have an administration that is doing something, and we ought to teach all the students in the world what it looks like being a human being in the world. I think about you, Kiyoshi, I first met you when you were actually out there in the streets. It was like a matching. Something spark. I saw that. I was like, wow, look at these young people marching the streets. They are marching for something, like they are standing for something. You are not just sitting in the classroom or talking about it. You are out there in the streets saying, we ought to have a free and a just world. We ought not to treat young African American men this way. We ought not to kill them. We ought not to look at them as if they are born a crime. That's something to march for. You stood for something much greater than yourself. So what does it look like to be driving on the road, wondering if you will be shot for not doing anything, but rather because you have a particular ancestry, perhaps a particular DNA variant, and that is reason and cause to kill.
Now, you said DNA. Before we started filming, you talked to me about this amazing thing YouTube's a part of.
Oh, yes. So one of my credentials is in biology. So I do remember at Los Altos, remember when I was teaching about DNA, and so what I did at that time was I brought a Bengal tiger and a taiga, which is 3/4 of a tiger and 25% lion. You remember that?
That was so cool. I thought you were keeping them in your backyard, to be honest. But
So that was like the beginning of this concept, like, wow, what makes a lion a lion? What makes a tiger? Or a liger a liger? Or a tiliga a tiliga? Because there were 6 on the planet, and we had one of those. And so being able to bring them in class at school, I ought to do that. It's like marching for something. If I'm teaching biology, I ought to bring biology in the classroom.
besides just the textbook.
Yes. Or the students ought to be out there in the world to be in biology.
Now, being out there in the world, technology has an immense impact right now in our schools, for good and for bad. People are saying technology is helping connect students and having them learn curriculum in different ways. But at the same time, it's what's also turning them off from curriculum and making them almost ignore it in a way.
Yes.
So how you're big on using technology because you want to connect
Right.
schools across the world, but how do you see that happening?
Well, so right now I'm the curriculum and instruction director with the Peace Innovation Lab at Stanford. And my question is, how might we design technology for good? How might we design technology that increases our ability to engage positively with each other? So we just talked about DNA within the context of big cats, like with tiligas. So right now at Stanford, for example, I'm teaching a course on peace technology. It's called Design as Discovery. So DNA itself is a technology, and I'm working with a partnership with 23andMe, and with this technology, it's a health technology, it's a biotechnology that allows every human being to be able to look at their genetic footprint or blueprint. It tells you exactly your makeup, what you're susceptible to, your ancestry. And what I found remarkable about this technology is the fact that we are all the same. And in fact, we all share a common ancestry. So by simply like putting your saliva in a tube and using this groundbreaking technology that we've invented here in the Valley, it's now possible for me to be able to see that, oh, I am susceptible to Alzheimer or Parkinson's or breast cancer, you name it, based on that data. And so that would allow me to actually act and behave differently and change my behavior to alleviate that risk factor.
Yeah, so this technology can save lives, basically.
It's basically a moonshot thinking about health. Like we are rethinking health. How do we approach health? How do we become responsible for our own health? So instead of dealing with it at the hospital, why not avoid making that hospital trip? So with education, we have the opportunity to actually teach meaningful and relevant curriculum, one that is aligned to today's digital native, like yourself.
That's truly amazing. But we live in Silicon Valley, Los Altos High, where we met.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a private school; it's a public school, but it's very, very wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
22% of students live in poverty, and a lot of schools do not have the resources Los Altos has
Mm-hmm.
or other private schools.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, how do we basically even the playing field? Because these 22%, they don't have, all the accessibilities that, Los Altos is like, oh, you didn't bring your laptop today? Here's another one, and the wireless is off the charts. It's just everything you need is there. What about all the schools that don't have all that? How do we basically provide them?
Wow. So thank you for that question. That's a very, very wicked question. It's a wicked problem. It's a wicked design challenge. So how might we make education accessible and equitable for everyone? So I am engaged.
Where do we start?
Where do we start? Where do we start? I think it starts this way. It does start by having global conversations, and I've very much enjoyed the Kiyoshi global conversations. Because by having those conversations, there is an awareness in the world that this is there. So I do appreciate your rawness and asking the tough questions. It's not a question that I was quite ready for, but I will do the best that I can. So we are moonshot thinking this. I think my idea with a variety of scholars and educators like Esther Waj, is to moonshot think how education occurs. So we've been discussing an idea of like having a community studio. And so we're engaging the LightGrid studios in San Carlos where we could have like a space where every community on the planet could actually go and have access to content creation and content sharing. And so even if the individual schools may not have access to the technology, by having a model that is like world class, like the LightGrid, in every community, we might be able to actually close the opportunity gap. So I'm thinking by the end of the year, we should at least have some pilots of this model, and hopefully we can have like some outcomes that would allow us to engage with organizations, with governments throughout the entire planet to make it possible. So I do know that there is a conversation with thought leaders in philosophy at Stanford, computer science, with design school, and the LightGrid, as well as with YouTube, with Google, 23andMe. So a lot of stakeholders are engaged in this conversation. It is a wicked problem. It will require more than just educators to solve it.
Now, why is I know you don't have the definite answer, but why do you think America has, in a way, put education to the side? We don't value it as other countries do. For example, all the students you brought in for this awesome these classes you're teaching this summer. They're from all over the planet. You know, they're from Europe. They're from Singapore, and the few students I've met, I can tell they truly value their education. Like, they don't just take it for granted.
That
But
is true. That is true. I mean, this summer I have the privilege of working with at least 720 students from 32 different countries. And with America, we have access. We never have to worry about access to libraries, technology, even though we still have a large gap between schools like Los Altos and San Francisco, etc. Most places, they don't even have a physical class. They meet in a church or on a tree. They write on dirt.
so you're saying the hunger in America for education is just being taken for granted almost.
Yes, that hunger is not there because there is always this need for instant
Gratification.
and the technology that we have may, in fact, be responsible for that. And that is why my question is, how might we design technology responsibly? Because we are on the precipice of human evolution. So this is a critical part of our own evolution as a species. It's like another great oxygen event, which can make or break it. So this technology that we're developing and designing rapidly may, in fact, destroy us as a species. And it also may actually provide us with new possibilities. So with inventions in biotechnology, we might be able to design a situation where human beings could live in perpetuity. It's like Henrietta cells. Henrietta absolutely transformed the planet. Have you heard of her?
For those of us who haven't, remind us.
So Henrietta was an African American lady. She gave so much joy in the world. In the 50s, she developed cervical cancer. Her cells were unique in that they did divide rapidly. And so when she went to Johns Hopkins, they were amazed about that. And so they took those cells and used them for research. And people would call from all over the world. They would put Henrietta cells in test tubes. And those cells were used to do research on how to cure cancer. They were injected with the HIV virus. They were used for every major breakthrough that we have right now has been impacted by Henrietta cells. Every single biotechnological breakthrough.
Now, the thing about all that, they weren't exactly honest with her.
No, they were not.
There's actually, I think there's a documentary out there about this now.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were not. She was not aware this was happening.
She was not aware it was happening. She was not. She did not even give consent. Her family did not even get any compensation, and yet hundreds of millions of dollars were made from Henrietta. So we ought to honor Henrietta. They call them the healer cells because they wanted to they took out the last part of her first name and last name, and so the HeLa cells that are all over the world that have absolutely transformed the study of medicine and biological research do have a basis in Henrietta cells.
Now, how? So once again, biology and technology is being thrown into our everyday life and curriculum. So how do we intrigue kids? Because there's a difference between kids wanting to learn and having to learn.
So kids want to learn, and teachers and educational institutions ought to think differently about how to approach education. You guys are naturally interested in changing the world. So it's about really discovering what really matters to them, what really matters to the child, and then redesigning a customized curriculum that would still give them the content, that would move them to do more research about the issue. You could learn your mathematics, you could learn your history, you could learn your geography, you could learn all these subjects that we have that are so fragmented right now by focusing on a specific topic. So I've had students who have learned mathematics through music, or who have learned history through music and created music. So my students have written symphonies, for example. They have created wildlife sanctuaries. Right now they are looking at global conversations because the world needs that.
Definitely.
The world needs that. So there has to be that breaking point, like where we can create content and where we can share content and where we can share these conversations, which is why I feel like the Kiyoshi Global Conversation, the Cardinal Impact Conversation that's happening at Stanford, the philosophy talks, all of those things are necessary in rethinking education. That's why I'm also excited to have the Moonshot Thinking way, with Esther Wojcicki's thinking, Moonshot Thinking methodology. She wrote a book called Moonshot Thinking in Education. I think every teacher ought to read that book because it allows you to think outside the box. It allows you to have any student to have their idea realized. A student should be able to come to their teacher and say, well, I am interested in what it looks like being in the moon. If I were to go there, what does that look like? And the teacher ought to support them in designing a trip there.
So you want to reawaken the little kid, basically, in everyone.
Yes.
In a way, the intrigue and everything.
Yeah, I do. I really do. You really got me there. Yes, it's always there.
Now, part of the problem, schools across the country, from college to all the way back through high school into middle school, there's an enormous amount of pressure on kids nowadays. Let me just read this stat to you. Suicide is the second leading cause of death between ages 10 through 24. And each day, 5,240 attempts by a young person grade 7 through 12 attempt suicide each day. Now, there's an enormous amount of pressure on this generation. How do we keep from basically going overboard with trying to, get kids to bas- basically from the whole, oh, I have to do it like this, I have to do it like this, into a more free thinking realm where the weight of the world doesn't rest on their shoulders.
Wow, that's a very, very tough question. I just this year alone, I have two kids that I worked with, that I knew, that we lost on suicide. And it's a big problem in schools in the valley, even the East Coast. It's very, very heartbreaking when the future disappears. And what we ought to do is create conversations and spaces where kids feel connected. There has to be a school connectedness program where every kid can be included and feels included in the conversation. It's possible that they are not being heard. For somebody to go through that process of like, it's no longer worth it for me to live on this planet, there is no longer a reason for my existence, there is something missing in our schools.
Now, a few weeks ago, I brought in a friend of mine, Cesar, and we talked about the concept of a safe space and how, in theory, it works, but in practice, it's failing us. Are you saying we need to use all these technological advancements we have and use that for our conversations?
We ought to use them strategically. We ought to do that. And I wonder if the one-to-one conversations where kids are connecting with a human being in a very, very physical sense of being here is something being lost. I wonder if their preference to text, to do Snapchat, to Facebook, yes. Mark Zuckerberg says we are more connected than ever, and yet we are also disconnected than ever. If technology is in fact making a difference, how might we design for persuasive visual content creation that creates the possibility of a kid or a student and adults even have meaning in their life? Can you do something meaningful, something that gives you a reason to exist on the planet? And how do we communicate that in the classroom, where students discover that? Should the teachers be intentional, or should schools be intentional? Should we rethink the whole bureaucratic process that may hinder that free thinking?
Now, my final question to you is basically that. In a nation as divided as ours, just do you believe we're capable right now to come together and solve these problems? Or do you think, are we too divided right now?
We are in a divided nation. We are seeing divided communities. We're absolutely divided. And there is a possibility of rebuilding the nation and the world. There's a possibility of inclusion if we can look at biotechnology, for example. If everyone could see how similar we are. If everyone could look at their DNA footprint, look at that visual, they possibly could have a new context. If every designer of technology could look at that, like, am I designing a technology that does not exclude a certain group? And how might I alleviate that? So we are in a place in the valley where we have the brain power, we have the technology, we have the innovation, and we have some of the brightest minds on the planet, like you, who are looking at these questions. And so if we can be strategic in designing, we can discover something in rebuilding our community.
Thank you, Freedom.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Nice work, man. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Really great conversation.
Wow.
Pleased to be a part of it.